You know what? They're telling us that big ag is feeding the world. But the truth is, it's starving communities, putting small farmers out of business and filling grocery stores with food that's making us all sick. So who's really benefiting from all this? Today, we're exposing the real impact of big industrial farming and what needs to change.
Jim, you've been farming for long enough. When did you figure out that big ag is a lie?
Grant, I'll tell you, I realized big ag was alive when I saw the numbers on how many farms have been lost since 1935. I know, like on a national level, in 1935, we had 7 million farms. Today, we've got 1 million farms. And what they're doing out there to farmers and making it tight for them to do business, barely making profits. You've got farmers right now having to work side jobs. It's all a big lie, and it's all rigged, and they can't make enough money to survive. And that's what's putting all of our farms out of business.
My father, when he was doing farming for about 15 years, he always struggled getting the right price from customers.
Mm-hmm.
They were always pricing him and comparing him to conventional prices. And when I started working for you, I was really surprised. I didn't think that the prices would fly. But tell me kind of how you were able to negotiate such high prices with our customers.
Well, you hit on something. It's about the pricing on organic farming. You are the price maker. When you're a bigger farmer and more on the conventional side where you're getting dictated to by big ag, like big chemical companies, big pharmaceutical companies, big fertilizer companies, all of a sudden now you're in the commodities market where you're going to take whatever price you can get. And my father used to call that hustling backwards. When you do a lot of work, and then at the end of the day, you don't even make a profit from it. And you're looking at, on the conventional side, big ag farms, they struggle to make $75 an acre. And you and I know that what we did on our farm, you can make, after $62,000 that I made last year in gross sales, I made $18,000 per acre. And so the difference is you can make a lot of money doing organic farming, but big ag farming puts so much pressure on you and the margin's so tight that you can't make a living at it. And that's what I love about organic farming.
And I'm really not impressed with the quality and the taste of some of the conventional products in the grocery store. And when I look at a conventional farmer's field, I'm thinking, how much did they spend on fertilizer, on pesticide, and how much of their yield are they actually going to get out of it? And sure, their plants grow faster and they get better yields using these, conventional fertilizers, but there's a finite supply of it. It's coming out of the earth. Before this big Ukraine war, a lot of the fertilizer for the world was coming from Russia, and they just found big supply of it in Nordic countries. But we cannot keep farming like this forever, where we're just putting tons of nitrogen into the soil and running it off into our lakes and oceans.
Well, it's making us sick. And that really is the real cost of, when you look at conventional farming, big ag farming, when I was growing up, nobody was sick in our house. We all ate well. We were eating organic before organic food was even cool. And not a lot of people back then had chronic diseases. But right now, over 60% of Americans are dealing with chronic diseases, and it's costing us about $1 trillion a year in healthcare costs. And it's all driven because of all the pesticides and all the dyes and preservatives that are being put into all the foods that we eat that are coming from big ag. And I'm not here today to blame our fellow farmers out there who have big farms and using these strategies. I'm blaming big ag. And the big ag companies are anybody out there like Monsanto, ArcherMidland, Daniels, Bayer. They're the ones that are infusing all these chemicals and forcing our brothers on the bigger company, on the bigger farmer size, to use all of these solutions that are making us sick. And that's why everybody today has got diabetes and cancer and all these major problems.
But what's the alternative? We can't go back to subsistence farming, but at the same time, there's got to be a better balance that we can strike. I would like to see more farms switch to organic and switch away from these big chemicals, and tell me what you think about that.
I would like to see them start to embrace a lot of the things that we do. Now, if you're set up and you're doing 1,000 acres of corn, 50% of it's corn, 50% of it's soybeans, you've got a big $1 million combine, it's very difficult to switch to another method. But what I would encourage is, our farms out there, our brothers out there who have these big farms, is to start raising 5 or 10 acres of blueberries or strawberries or okra and sell it directly to the market. And you'll end up making more than you're selling on the other 900 acres because you're going to be the price maker. Secondly, you're going to be offering something to the market that no one else may be offering. Like you and your dad, Eric, taught me how to raise okra. Nobody in the market produces okra, so I'm the okra king in Lexington, Kentucky. So I dictate the price, and it's good quality product, makes people feel good. So find something that's unique in your market and raise 5 or 10 acres of organic produce. You and your dad, you all taught me that you can use the right kind of equipment to be able to make it efficient to where you can raise 10 or 15, 20, even up to 100 acres. You don't have to do all this by hand. I know a lot of folks out there on the big ag side, they think we're in the Stone Age, but there are all kinds of tractors and poly planter. I know that you will know all of this, the planters that you can use to be able to scale up.
It's easy to think that we're in the Stone Age when you see farmers like Tony, using a hand tool to get rid of weeds, but really there's better solutions. And the best solution that my father came up for, keeping down the weed pressure was the plastic mulch. Mm-hmm. And, we would even use the white side up to kind of reflect some of the heat, because it gets pretty hot in Kentucky. It gets hot and humid in the summers, and you don't want your plants cooking while they're growing. And so
tell our friends out there, how do we lay that plastic mulch, and what does that mean, Grant?
Yeah, so it's really complicated, but we use a bed shaper, and we're laying a 3-foot wide piece of plastic with drip tape under it that we use to irrigate the field. And it's a really great solution because it helps our plants germinate, it keeps the moisture in, and it keeps the weeds down and the bugs out.
Well, I'll tell you, when I first met your parents, when Gail called me and invited me to come down to you all's house, first of all, if you don't have a friend in farming, you're up the creek. But when Gail called me and brought me down, met with your dad and Gail and talked for about 12 hours, and when they started telling me all about the bed maker and the poly planter and the deep soiler and the black fabric and the plastic mulch, but I realized soon that you all were really high-tech farmers. It was like you all were the Tesla of farming. And then when they invited me to meet with you a couple days later, I felt like I'd met Elon Musk of farming. The guy that's innovative and smart. And that's what you need to be successful. You can't be a small-time thinker. You've got to think big, and you've got to use the cutting-edge equipment to be able to make yourself productive so that you can compete out there at a lower cost and where you can still demand a top-line price. And that's what organic farming is all about, and that's why we're different.
And so, we do a pretty small-scale version of organic farming. You're about to scale it up, but tell me about how you're going to compete with these conventional farmers by scaling up organic farming.
Well, first of all, I'm going to hire more Grant Wallaces out there, farmer Grants, that are smart, good leaders, innovative, can think things through, plan. That's number one. People that can motivate others. Second, I'm going to be looking for the best kind of equipment out there. You and Eric show me all the equipment that you all have had. I've been blessed that you all have been able to help me to loan your equipment to my farm. It's helped me to operate at a lower cost. But I'm going to be going over to Louisville in a couple of weeks to their farm machinery show. And I want to find equipment that's similar to what you all have, but even larger, to where instead of building a bed, 1 bed at a time, maybe we can build 5 beds at a time. Maybe we can plant 5 rows at a time. And to even scale up and find equipment that can help us to do that. But it really is building on the success that you all have and using the kind of equipment that you all offer.
Jim, why is Big Ag making us sick?
Bottom line is 1.7 million Americans are dying every year to chronic diseases. And it's directly linked to pesticides and dyes and all these additives, and even fructose, corn syrup. Everybody's got diabetes. We're all sick, obese, and dying of cancer. And it's all driven on the things that we're eating in our food. And the big difference is going on is that we're using glyphosate and all these major pesticides. 1 ounce, a teaspoon of glyphosate can kill 1 billion bees. Now, if it'll kill bees, it's going to kill us. And so that's why we're committed to organic farming. We want to make Americans healthier, not sicker. And so to do that, we want to produce great food that is free from all these chemicals so that we can all live a more vibrant, healthier lifestyle.
They tell us Big Ag is the only way to feed the world. They tell us organic farming can't scale. They tell us that small farms can't survive. But what if we told you they're lying? It doesn't add up because it's never been about feeding people, it's been about feeding profits. We're taking turns debunking some of the most common lies pushed by Big Ag. Each one presents a statement, and Jim fact checks it live with the truth. Jim, do you think we would starve without Big Ag?
Absolutely not. As a matter of fact, I think organic farmers could step up, and by helping them to scale. And you know what? If the federal government would help to subsidize it like they're doing right now in Big Ag, the federal government's spending over $30 billion a year through subsidies through our Farm Bill program. And the majority of that's going towards helping farmers to raise more of what makes us sick. So as a matter of fact, we don't need to eat what makes us sick. We need to start eating what makes us feel better. What can make us live longer? And that's really organic farming and organic 100% fresh produce and 100% organic produce and fresh meats that don't have all these chemicals in them. So we've got to stop subsidizing things that make us sick. And so if the federal government started using more of its subsidies to be able to help us to look at the right kind of equipment, the right kind of research, the right kind of technology to help organic farmers to scale up, guess what? We could feed the world. And you'd have farmers out here raising 1,000 acres of green beans, 1,000 acres of okra, 1,000 acres of soybeans that are 100% all natural instead of making us all sick.
And what do you think about people who say organic farming can't scale?
You know, then come to Kentucky. You haven't met the Wallace family. You haven't met Eric and Gail Wallace and Grant because they helped me to scale up. You know, the first year we launched, we did about $1,000 in sales. Last year I did $62,000 on 1.4 acres. How's that for scaling up? And the way I was able to do it was to think through a plan of how to make it happen, find some customers first before growing, you know, your produce and then trying to scramble at the end of the year on trying to figure out where to sell it. But most of all, it's using the right kind of equipment, the poly plant or the bed maker, the deep soil, or all the equipment and all the technologies that you all taught me to use, like the plastic mulch and, you know, all the black fabric between the rows to minimize weed pressure. And if you can use some of the latest tools, you can really scale up and produce a lot of great product that you can sell to the market.
GMOs are the only way to meet global food demand.
You know what? That's a shame to say that, because I know a lot of big ag farmers out there, they really are behind it because the big companies out there who are forcing them to produce it, that's what they believe in. But you and I, you know, that's just hogwash. And the reason why is that GMOs make us sick as well. They're also fed with a lot of chemicals. They aren't natural, and they get into our system and they make us sick. And so it ends up having it to where, again, it's contributing to all of these chronic diseases that we have versus what you and I grow on the organic side that eliminates chronic diseases. And if we find new ways to help farmers to grow more non-GMO, non-pesticide, 100% all natural organic produce, we're going to reduce the cost for healthcare by $1 trillion here in the United States. In Europe, they don't even allow you to even sell GMOs, and you can't use pesticides to sell to all the consumers out there. And so what happens is that in the United States, we're at 60% of our residents in the United States, they have chronic diseases. In Europe, it's 30%. And so I'll tell you right now, we need to get to a point where we've got a Surgeon General's warning on GMOs, pesticides, dyes, and even fructose to make sure that consumers know when they go in the stores to buy that they know what the risk is to eating food that has all these problems with it. We have to hold our standards high to get that seal that says organic. We have to have the FDA and the USDA to come out to our farms and inspect everything that we're doing. I think it's high time for us to educate the consumer at the point of sale by having a Surgeon General's warning on the label saying this has GMOs and it can make you sick. It's got glyphosate in it. And be aware, they've just had to sell for $12 billion because it creates cancer. If we know it creates cancer, then we need to have the Surgeon General's warning on there to let consumers know that it's at risk.
It's amazing that you can even grow GMOs as an organic crop. And since I grew up eating organic vegetables, I can tell the difference in taste and texture when I'm eating a GMO tomato versus an heirloom tomato. Heirloom tomatoes, they're sweet. Yeah. So many people have never even had an heirloom tomato because they just don't exist. And, they were bred instead for supermarket shelves and for your hamburgers, and they needed to be shelf stable so that they wouldn't get bruised.
Yeah.
They needed to be, have a uniform texture and have less seeds, but it really reduced the quality and the taste and the nutrient density of these vegetables.
And Grant, it's really all about trickery, because what it is that oftentimes we're buying produce from out of the country. More than 42% of the produce that we eat is coming from Guatemala, Venezuela, far away. And so it needs all these pesticides and all of these things in it to make it preserved to be able to get to retail and where it still looks good. But it's terrible. And you taught me this, is that if you buy a head of lettuce and look at it after about a week, all the edges are brown. And the reason why, that's why it's got Monsanto and pesticides in it. Is that about right?
Yeah, and you're saying, hey, we're shipping all this food from out of the country, but why is buying local food too expensive for most people when it's cheaper to fly it on an airplane or ship it in a truck?
When you look at, we're spending $1 trillion a year on healthcare cost. Metformin, a major medicine that we use to fight diabetes. They've got about $300 million in sales. But overall, you're looking at about $1 trillion in healthcare costs. When you add that to the cost of conventional product, it's 10 times more than organic. Secondly, if you eat organic, you're not going to have to take all of these drugs to fight your chronic diseases. So I look at it that organic is about 20% of the cost of conventional. Meaning, when I say conventional, where it's been drenched, sprayed with all these pesticides, induced with dyes, we've put a lot of sugar into it. When you look at the cost to cost and compare apples to apples, we're at about 25% of conventional farm product.
I absolutely agree. Just the fossil fuel use alone, you're polluting so much to ship stuff, overseas and from South America and Central America. When you compare the carbon footprint of a local product like a local fruit or a local vegetable, it's astronomically low compared to shipping it from somewhere else.
And you know what? Early on, you taught me all about the impact on pesticides. Our farm out there at Coleman Crest Farm, during the summer, we've got birds, insects flying everywhere. We've got all kinds of wildlife. And the reason why is we're not growing our crops on a graveyard. Most farms, if you look at them, they're beautiful. But if it's corn and soybeans underneath that soil, it's nothing. It's all dead. It's a graveyard. And at Coleman Crest Farm, that's why we have so many ecosystem partners. I know your friends like Chris the Garter Snake and Carolina the Praying Mantis. These are folks out there in our ecosystem that have been on our farm for 30 and 40 million years. And here comes man on farms 5 million years here, and they're killing everything. And the reason why all of our insects and all of our ecosystem partners are dying is because of all these pesticides. So it destroys the environment, it destroys the ecosystem, it destroys all of our soil, and that's what you need to produce a good product. And it's all contamination. So it's making our earth sick, and it's making all of us sick.
And Coleman Crest Farm and other organic farms are so full of life and diversity. And when you look at these monocultures where they're only growing one crop, they're growing soybeans or they're growing corn, and there's no in between. You can't get the same amount of birds and wildlife and insects in there that you can in an organic farm, and it all contributes to the quality of the soil, which goes straight into the quality of the vegetable that you get when you pick it up from the supermarket.
The things you taught me about how to work with the ecosystem partners, the bees, the butterflies, and how they cross-pollinate. You remember that year when we went to Organic Association of Kentucky and learned about how to grow an acre of sunflowers and how it brings in more bumblebees and monarch butterflies. And they taught us all about this pollination. Tell us about that. What's that all about, Grant?
It's really amazing. So sunflowers actually have UV in their flowers, and it helps retain moisture, and it also attracts those insects. These bees are able to pick up the UV coloration that we're not able to see with our naked eyes. And that attracts them. So they're going fire the flower, and then suddenly they come
like
across...
the smell of it, and they like the taste of that nectar too, don't they?
Yes, the pollen and the nectar, and then suddenly they come to our tomato patch or an okra patch, and they go, on a okra flower, and then they go and they're drinking the nectar. They get a little bit of the
pollen
okra
and
pollen
shake
on
it
their
off.
legs, and then they go to the next okra flower, and that's how you get your crop. That's how it starts forming it. It goes straight into the flower and forms the vegetable.
Now, see, that's how Adam and Eve run. That's how they ran their garden. They were not spraying glyphosate and, putting glucose in all their food. They were working with the Lord's nature plants and all these insects out there. And when you look at what we saw with that 1 acre of sunflowers and bringing in bees from all throughout Latin, they came from thousands of miles away and said, hey, you got to stop. There's Coleman Crest. It's safe. It's safe, guys. It's safe. And when we brought in millions of bees that 1 year, that first year, and they cross-pollinated with our okra, we went from doing 40 pods per plant to over 100 pods per plant. And that was all natural. We didn't use any chemicals, and we got more productivity. So that's what organic farming is all about, is that we work with nature, not against nature. And it was intended for us to work with our partners who are great insects like bees and butterflies and praying mantis to be able to help us to produce these products. While you may not live close enough to get our farm fresh produce in Lexington, Kentucky, you can still take control of your food choices by supporting local farmers near you. Seek out locally grown organic produce, visit your local farmers markets, and demand better food options in your community. Because the truth is, who grows your food matters just as much as what's in it. If you're in Kentucky, visit ColemanCrestFarm.com to learn more about us. And wherever you are, support local farms, eat real food, and be a part of our movement. Now back to the show.
Now let's hear from the folks at the top, the CEOs who make billions off of the system. We've got real quotes from big ag executives, and we're breaking them down one by one. Let's see what they really mean. So Jim, we have a Monsanto executive here saying, GMOs are the safest, most efficient way to feed the growing world. What do you think about that?
If that were true, then they'd be able to sell it over in Europe. It's illegal. And it should be illegal in the United States. It's what's making us sick. It's bullshit. And the reason why is that people are dying every single day. We've got 1.7 million Americans dying every year to chronic diseases. And GMOs are a major contributing factor to that. And we've got to really let people know about this. And we've got to make sure they're informed. And we've got to stop government from subsidizing this. We're subsidizing this. The taxpayers' money is subsidizing this by over $30 billion a year. And it's got to stop.
It's ridiculous. So here we have the Tyson Foods CEO saying consumers want affordable protein, and that's exactly what we provide.
And you know what? That's exactly what a gangster would say. Tyson Foods just shut down 4 major plants, and it shut down 4 major communities in the United States, putting thousands of workers out of business. And on top of the way they raise chickens and the way they raise pigs in covered facilities where they don't even move while they're being injected with all of these chemicals is just pure inhumane. And it's inhumane to the animals that they process, and it's inhumane to us because it's making us sick. And so what they're doing is destroying communities. They're wiping out thousands of jobs at a time. And they're doing this to raise the prices on what they produce. If they have less supply in the market, then they can get more price. And that's what it's all about, is squeezing the consumer, make us sicker, make us more reliant on medication, drugs, because they're all linked up. This is all rigged because the foundation of all is chemicals. And so this is total hypocritical because they're not helping communities. They're putting communities out of business.
And in Arkansas, these big meat companies, they're hiring high schoolers, and instead of paying a living wage in their meat processing plants, they're having high schoolers doing this dangerous work with sharp knives, and all of their meat it's full of human growth hormone and just puts you out of balance and has all of these antibiotics and stuff that you really don't want. And then you go to a grocery store and everything is $7-8 a pound for chicken. And for ground beef, it's ridiculous.
And Grant, it's making us all sick. 72% of young people, they can't even join the military if they wanted to. They're unfit. They're obese. They have high cholesterol. They've got chronic diseases. They've got asthma. And that's what's causing this. A lot of it's being caused by Tyson and their production processes and how they inject and how they're reducing supply and making these communities weaker and taking advantage, quite frankly, of workers.
There has got to be a better way.
It is. It's got to be.
So here we have Bayer saying that pesticides are essential for modern food production.
Pesticides are essential for death, and you and I know it. Over 1.7 million Americans die because of pesticides. And it's not even just the consumers who are eating pesticide-driven foods. Farmers are getting sick. You and I know when we're out there working at Coleman Crest Farm, we don't leave there hacking and coughing up and calling in the next day sick. You know, when you go to an organic farming convention, like at Organic Association of Kentucky, everybody there is in good shape. They look like you. They're in good shape. They're bulked out. They're happy. They're not there eating junk food, and they're working, and they're not dealing with chemicals every single day. And the bottom line is, if pesticides were safe, why did RFK become so successful in holding Monsanto accountable and getting them hit with a $12 billion lawsuit? And they're paying because they found out that it's causing cancer for the farmers and it's causing cancer for consumers. They need to have a Surgeon General warning on every single pack that we buy that's got any form of pesticides. Over in Europe, you can't even sell pesticides. Here in the United States, we've got big government officials that are in bed with them. It's all corrupt, Grant. It's corruption. And you've got Big Ag, and you've got all the politicians, including Bernie. Bernie Sanders, he receives $1.4 billion a year, $1.4 million a year from the pharmaceutical and ag industry, and he takes it. And the reason why is that they need it to win. And it's all corrupt and rigged against us. So pesticides are essential for death. They're essential for a politician who needs to raise money to win, but they're not essential for us. We need clean, safe produce, clean meats to eat so that we can live a long life. Our bodies were meant to live over 100 years. In the United States, we're going down. There are more young people dying every year. 1.7 million people dying every single year from chronic diseases is ridiculous. All right, folks, it's time for the Farming Freedom Pledge. Here's how it works. We're here in the studio right now exposing Big Ag's biggest lies, sharing real-life stories and strategies for small farmers, and fighting for a food system that works for people and not for big corporations. And we're doing it all for free. All we're asking is one simple thing. Hit that subscribe button on YouTube or follow us on your favorite podcast app. If you do, you'll officially join the ranks of farming freedom fighters, a community of people taking back their food, their land, and their health. So take the Farming Freedom Pledge. Subscribe to the Jim Coleman Show now, and let's grow something real together. Farming used to be about independence. Now Big Ag wants us to mean big debt, dependency, and corporate control. But it doesn't have to be that way. Today, we're talking about how small farmers are taking back their land, their businesses, and their freedom, and how you can do it too. Grant, you don't need 1,000 acres, 2,000 acres. There are a lot of big farms out there, you know, Big Ag that they sell their chemicals to and pesticides. You know, they've got $3,000 and $4,000 acres. And, you know, their big goal is trying to make $75 in net profit per acre. And they're thinking, you know, I've got a tractor. I don't need a lot of people. I'm driving all this big equipment. I'm happy with $75. But then you flip it to like at Coleman Crest Farm last year, we took 1.4 acres of our 13-acre farm. It was all uncovered. And we generated $62,000 on 1.4 acres. And I netted $18,000 in profit. So the bottom line is that you don't need to have 1,000 acres to be a good, successful organic farmer. If you've got 5 to 8 acres that you're growing, if you go out there today and buy a 5-acre farm where you're using 4 acres to produce organic produce, you could make, with a hoop house, covered buildings like you all had, you could make $200,000 gross and really net $120,000. That's pretty good living.
And Jim, these conventional farmers, they're going to plan for $75 an acre, but they're going to be upsold on different fertilizers.
Yeah.
You know, some salesman is going to tell them, hey, your field, your corn isn't as tall as it could be because you're low on nickel, you're low on phosphorus, and we got to upsell you on more fertilizer for this.
It's like drug dealers. You got the salesman coming around saying, well, if you didn't have good success, you need more.
You need
more. And they buy it and it puts them in more debt. And what's going on right now with Big Ag farmers is that their input costs, like fertilizer and all the things that they use to grow, pesticides, their chemicals are going through the roof, while commodities prices are going down because we've got all these tariffs and we've got excess supply. And it's the perfect storm. And you put that on top of right now we don't have a farm bill passed. 40% of their income comes from subsidies from the federal government, which is putting our brothers who are over there in the conventional side out of business. Versus for organic, you are the price maker. And you can go out there, and if you raise an intensive farm like you and I did, like Eric did when you were growing up on you all's farm and at Coleman Crest Farm, you could raise 3 or 4 acres and make 200,000 gross and net 120,000.
And Jim, when you're feeding the soil like we do at Coleman Crest Farm, we use cover crops, we use winter wheat, and we use hairy vetch to fix nitrogen in. We're saying, hey, we need less fertilizer because we don't want it running off into the streams. And all these farmers, we're having issues in the Gulf of Mexico, in the Great Lakes with all these algae blooms and then dead zones because all the fish are dying off because there's no more oxygen because of all this excess fertilizer causing these huge blooms.
And you hit on something else, and one other hidden cost that I want to throw in here is we're healthier. Your parents, Gail, she can ride a bike 100 miles a day, and Eric, he barely keeps up at about 75 miles per day, but they're able to do that because they're health conscious, and they don't have a back farm filled with all these chemicals making them sick. And I'm telling you right now, ever since I left big corporate America and came back home over the last 5 years, my health has totally improved. I feel stronger, healthier. I feel vibrant. I can walk 10 or 15,000 steps a day without huffing and puffing, and I feel better. And it's because I'm working in an environment that's free of all these chemicals, and I can breathe, and I'm getting good exercise. And that's what organic farming offers. Are you going to let Big Ag decide what you eat, or are you taking back control? It's time to grow the farm, build the wealth, change the game.